She moves into it, and there it goes. It's high enough, it's long enough, it's a beauty. It's straight between the posts. The score hit out.
And welcome to That's the Way It Was, a program that looks back at the history of rugby league. In episode 18, the South Sydney Rugby League Club has had a consistent and very successful presence in the game of rugby league since its inception in 1908. Sure, there have been some difficult periods, but South Sydney faced its greatest challenge in the late 1990s, when a combination of greed, power and ambition would remove the Rabbitohs from the rugby league competition. What followed next was an epic battle between an army of businessmen, lawyers and the media on one side, and on the other side, an army that nobody bothered to speak to. This army was the supporters of the South Sydney District Rugby League Football Club. To discuss this period of South Sydney's history, we're going to speak to Martin and Jerry Lissing, who were instrumental in starting a supporters organisation called Group 14. They're former board members at South, and they're currently involved in putting together a documentary called Tales of Reinstatement, a supporter's eye view of events that took place during this period. So Martin and Jerry, welcome to That's the Way It Was.
Thanks very much for having us. Glad to be here.
No problem.
Thanks, Rob.
Now, Martin, Jerry, before we discuss this period of South's history, I just wanted to give a bit of a background because all the court cases and the supporter activism basically emanates from December the 19th, 1997. Okay, because it's on this date that the Australian Rugby League and News Limited come to an agreement to end the Super League war. Now, there's many facets to this agreement, but the one we need to concentrate on is that there is an agreement that by the year 2000, the competition will be reduced to 14 teams and various criteria will be used to determine who those 14 clubs are. Also, another point there was that there's going to be massive financial rewards are going to be given to clubs that decide to merge. Okay, so now the ARL has a big meeting down at the Sydney Football Stadium and they vote by 36 votes to 4 to accept the peace agreement. Okay, Martin and Jerry, the first question I wanted to ask you, do you know who the 4 were that voted against the agreement?
I can't tell you the exact 4, but I'm sure that all the members that were there were very supportive. The foundation clubs, obviously we were one of them, and we would have been one of them, but I can't say for sure who the others are. Martin, do you recall?
No, I can't either. And it wasn't really, to my knowledge, it really wasn't disclosed that I can remember anyway.
Okay, all right. Well, let's fast forward. We know that South voted against this agreement to have a peace agreement with the Super League. Let's fast forward now. We're going to October the 15th, 1999. By this stage, some clubs had merged. St George Dragons and Illawarra Steelers had merged. Western Balmain were talking to each other. North Sydney basically have been declared insolvent and they have to go and talk to Manly. But the criteria is enforced and South Sydney are excluded from the 2000 premiership. So the first thing I wanted to ask both of you, what was your view of how the criteria was applied?
Well, actually, if we can go back one step, we knew that the criteria were set in such a way to exclude and discriminate against South. So I think Martin would back me up here, that we knew this was on from that date in 97. Having the 2 years lead in to the exclusion was actually a blessing for us. Right. Because that meant that we were able to plan for that exclusion. And Martin, Steve McDermott and I had that very frank discussion in about July 1998, and we decided we needed to do something and pull all of our resources together, because the criteria from memory was about juniors, it was about sponsorship, it was about performance, it was about financial viability, and
home and away crowds. There was
there were crowd numbers, and we were down on a few of those criteria because of financial reasons and others, but we were up in others, particularly in to juniors and so forth. Martin, would you add to that? Because there were some clubs that didn't meet some of the criteria that were still included.
That's right. The whole thing was rigged, right from the start, because there was more emphasis put on various things, and the history of the club wasn't really considered.
Yes.
Performance over, the number of years since 1908 that the Souths were there wasn't considered. The juniors, they paid lip service to that, because Souths have always had one of the biggest, together with Souths Juniors, have had one of the biggest junior competitions, and that was, they only paid lip service to that. So, they picked and chose what they wanted. Souths performed really well during the 99 season.
Yeah.
But then again, and Jerry and I often talk about this, that we had a restricted roster, of course, because the club had gone through a pretty rough period during the 90s, but performance-wise, we were doing quite well, and with limited players. Our main playmaker was Darryl Trindle, who was having a fantastic season. A game against Newcastle, I think we were just in the top 4, or maybe just outside, but we were performing really well. We played Newcastle, we beat them, and during that game, Tricky Trindle made a ball and all tackle against the Newcastle second rower, I think it was Steve Simpson. Simpson was his name.
Yeah.
And nothing happened on the field, but all of a sudden he was cited after the game and got 7 weeks for a ball and all tackle. And that, of course, from then on, we had no chance because we didn't have our playmaker. And that affected our performance drastically. So that was one of the weapons they used to try and get us. And I mean, who got 7 weeks for, they don't even get that for a head-high tackle now.
No, I know, yes.
and I'll just add too, we actually had more sponsorship. We had Martin and I started out with Steve McDermott, Nick Greiner and some others on the marketing committee with Souths in 94. And we had some great connections. And Martin, if you recall, during 98 and particularly 99, we actually had pretty substantial sponsorship from Downtown Duty Free and others. We had some really good RSL.com, and we actually had more sponsorship than some of the other merged clubs. But the merged clubs, of course, and we had access to all that when we went into court, were granted millions of dollars. I think it was around about $28 million for the Cowboys and $12 million for St. George. And all we had really was our membership sponsorship and I think the TV rights from Optus at the time, which I think was in the vicinity of about $2.5 million. But we actually had more sponsorship.
One of the things, of course, that they were able to make quite, so difficult for us was because of them targeting Souths, and really, the dogs were barking that Souths wouldn't be there. That in itself created an atmosphere that sponsors thought, well, they're not going to be there. So, that made it very, very difficult for us to get sponsorship because they played that tune that South wouldn't be there. So why sponsor them? So, it was a double whammy that they used as well.
But we prepared for that. We knew we were marked for exclusion, so we had the full 2 years to pull Group 14 together and start rallying all of our resources to fight this, because we knew we'd be fighting it.
All right, that's what I wanted to know, because in November 1999, South filed papers with the federal court there saying that the Trades Practices Act has been breached. And the following month, in December, will South lose this court case. So George Piggins, who's the chairman of South at this stage, he announces that he's going to raise a $2 million fund to fight the decision. And now, Martin and Jerry, this is when I was just wondering, I wanted to know, the supporters organisation, Group 14, has it already been started by this stage, or did it start when George wanted to get together this $2 million fighting fund?
Martin would probably go back on that, but I just want to correct one little thing.
Yeah.
That court case,
yes,
first went to court seeking an interlocutory injunction to be included in the 2000 season. We lost that case. In a way, that was a blessing in disguise, which we can talk about, because we would have had to fight a court case, put a team on the field, and so on. But I'll hand over to Martin to fill in how Group 14 started and got together.
Right. The year before, in 98, towards the end of that season, and I just can't remember the exact date, Jerry might know it, but we played, South played Canterbury, and we got a hiding.
I think it was the 12th of July, I think.
Out at the football stadium.
Yeah.
Now, at that time as well, you might remember, and it was on the footy show, George Piggins went to South Juniors to see about getting funding for the club in the 99 season. That was knocked back by the juniors at the time, or there was no agreement. George came out, and I think it was on the footy show, where he said, well, we're going to have to put our colours in a glass case, and or fall on our sword. Then we had the loss against Canterbury, and Steve McDermott, Jerry and I were at that game, and we got together and we said, look, we've got to do something about this, because, there's going to be no club, and we're not going to have a team. We've got all these supporters, and we know how many supporters there are of Souths around Australia. That's going to be a tragedy, so let's do something about it. So we decided to form, first of all, to have, it was a lunch, actually, that we organised, and I think that was about the 6th or 7th of August.
That's right.
At the Cambridge Inn, and we got all the South, and they were just South supporters, high-profile people, sporting people, all the people that we can go into who were there. And we had a meeting, and we had a clock on the wall, and it had 5 minutes to midnight. And we got these people together, and we said, look, we want to form a group to assist South. Steve, Jerry and I, and also Nick Greiner were on the marketing committee at that stage, which had sort of shrunk a bit, and we were the last four standing on that marketing committee. So we thought we'd better do something about it.
Yeah.
So we formed Group 14, and Group 14 was an idea of Don Lane back in 1981.
Yes, Don Lane was a very big supporter of South. Yes.
Yeah, that's right. Don was a life member, and he also, with Mike Cleary, saved the Leagues Club in 1972, I think it was.
72. Yeah.
And they were very much involved. But Don was very passionate, and he always talked about South on his show on Channel 9 during the week, and just spoke about South and had players on and had everyone like Russell does now, them wearing South gear. But anyway, so Jerry and Don and Steve and I were friends with Don, of course, and I rang Don and said, Don, we want to use that group number 14 that you wanted to use, which represented 13 players on the field, and number 14 was the supporter in the stands.
Yes, supporters. Yes.
And we gave him the courtesy and said, Don, can we use that? And he said, sure, let's go for it. And so we called it Group 14, which were all the high profile people. Yes. And the aim was then that all the supporters would be the number 14s.
Okay.
So Group 14 and the supporters were the number 14s.
All
and
right.
From that day, that started the movement that everyone now calls Group 14.
All right, because this is another thing, because, well, that supporter activism that I was talking about there at the introduction, it's already begun by October 15th. Okay, October 15th, the decision to remove South from the competition. But on October the 10th, so 5 days before South are kicked out of the competition, there's a rally, Reclaim the Game rally. Which I remember this one. Now, you were involved in organising this that event there. I remember this one ended up at the town hall as well. Was Group 14 behind this Reclaim the Game rally?
Yep.
Yeah,
Certainly was. Yeah.
So just to what happened? That was the first rally.
That was the first one. Yes.
If I can say that Group 14 had already been going for a year at that time.
Okay, so yes, yeah, all right.
So Group 14 with a support group, but at the time, Martin, Steve and I and others were getting, moving towards being on the board of the club. But because of the marketing committee, we were tasked, and I think that Martin became director of football when we were excluded, and I was director of marketing, and Steve McDermott, the administration area, because we had very few staff and so forth. But when we were discussing that with the group, which included board members and the club administration at the time, George and Nolene and so forth, he said, "Well, we've all got to get together," and I said, "Well, we should have a rally." And then and we started working towards that. Originally, the plan was to march from Redfern Oval to Randwick Racecourse, and Nolene and I went along and had discussions. And then when we all got together, of course, the great Henry Morris said, "No, you got to go to the streets, go right up, So we talked about crossing the bridge, and he said, "No, go to the bloody town hall, and get the city happening." So really, we all worked on that committee. It was very much a group effort, and it came under the marketing banner, but we all allocated roles and coordinated it. And
Jerry, we were on the board at that time.
We were on the board, so we'd just come on the board, and we brought in a professional management group who were involved. That was late. That was a bit later, actually. Yeah. But we were on the board at the time, and at the board meeting, we rallied the board, the supporters, Group 14, which we were still part of. But we wanted to make Group 14 as Martin said, a very inclusive movement that included not only the board, but the supporters, the high-profile people that we had who were key drivers. So yes, that was actually initiated and agreed to by the board, and with the support of the juniors too, we might add.
Yeah.
Well, this is Martin and Jerry. This is another thing that I wanted to just bring up, because one of the NRL's requirements, to get back in the competition is you've got to have a 5-year plan, and of course, for South to have a 5-year plan, you've got to get some money. So I suppose that you had to re-establish some sort of links with the South juniors. I would imagine this was very important. How did this come about, re-establishing the links with the South juniors?
Yeah, that was really at the start of, after we formed Group 14 in 98, we were always talking with Henry Morris and the people at the juniors, because we always knew that was the link and for the future success of South. One of the important things that we did there was when we announced to the world about Group 14 officially, was at the season launch that we had. We had two season launches, but we had a big press conference at South Juniors to announce to the world what was happening. We subsequently had the official South Sydney launch for '99 at Parliament House that Deirdre Grueser hosted with all the players and our Group 14. Then we started, the movement, and of course we had to play in the '99 season, as Jerry said before.
Yeah.
One of the critical things about losing that initial interlocutory injunction was that we weren't going to play in 2000. That was a key because, as Jerry said, we wouldn't have been able to survive without, with having to form a team,
a club,
sponsors and everything else. So that was very difficult.
Okay.
So, and that was when the ball started rolling, and we then put a presentation together with the Group 14, and we went to the South board and said, this is what we've got to do.
Yes.
We've got to hit the juniors over the head with a business plan, not a baseball bat. And so we did a presentation to South Juniors and asked them for funding for the '99 season, which then they came on board and they gave us the funding for that. And that's when we organised, the Group 14 organised complete marketing to help run the administration and run the club. We needed people to do that because all the Group 14 people had their own careers.
Yes.
And we had, I think, only 3 people on staff. Wasn't that correct, Jerry?
Yeah, a lot of volunteers. Yeah, we had 3 official full-time staff members and volunteers, some who were working full-time, as we just about were with our own businesses.
All right.
But just the point about the business plan.
Yes.
Complete marketing, those guys actually were senior executives in SOCOG, the Sydney organisation.
Oh, yes, okay, yep.
And they actually delivered that, and they had a tremendous background actually in the AFL area, and Angus Hawley was there, and David Collier and Bernard Lange, and they were very, very high-profile sports administrators.
Yeah.
And we actually put a business plan together where we planned not only our events, our sponsorship moving forward, but I dare say that, we know that we actually had a better business plan when we were out of the comp than most of the clubs that were in the comp had, if they had one. And the reason was they didn't worry because they were getting looked after by Rupert, and they were writing checks on the back of an envelope, and we started becoming extremely professional. And I believe, and Martin I think would agree with me, that whilst we're excluded from the comp, we probably had one of the most highly organised, coordinated and professional administrations in the game.
All right. Okay, all right. Well, one of the really big fundraising events that occurs during this period was on November the 20th, 1999. This was the Save Our South dinner.
That's right.
The Sydney Convention Centre.
That's right.
And well, this turned out to be a very successful event, didn't it?
Yep. We had, I think there were 1,700 people attended. We had 700 on the waiting list, and it was all organised in a matter of 3-4 weeks. And that's where Russell bought the bell, and also the first football that in the game, and that was the public profile of the launch.
I just pulled out the figures before the meeting, and we raised $340,000 that night.
Okay. And were there other sponsorship deals? Were you able to put together some other sponsorship deals? You or the group members able to put together some other sponsorship?
Well, we were focused very much at that time, not so much on sponsorship, but on fundraising.
Fundraising, sorry.
And we had a whole series of events from, at the time I was general manager of food and beverage at the Sydney Opera House, so we had a pretty high profile lunch there where we raised, I think from memory, about 90,000 just at one lunch.
Yeah.
That was George
Jerry, if you remember, that's when Nick Pappas came to the
George. Yep. Yeah, he handed George his business card and said, "I'll do anything I can do to help legally." But we had a whole series of events, from the concerts that we had and the football games. But we got into the selling of merchandise very heavily, with everything from bumper stickers to T-shirts to
the bumper stickers. They started to appear everywhere. Those bumper stickers.
and Martin was very involved in putting those together, and also a lot of the merchandise that we did. But the interesting thing was that we could not use our logo, because the logo was still owned by the NRL, licensed to the NRL. So if you look at the bumper stickers from that period, the rabbit looked a bit different, a lot different. And we couldn't use the South Sydney in our normal logo, could we, Martin? Because
that's right.
That was all licensed to the NRL. So, but we knew that when we spoke to Nick, and backtrack a little bit, because Martin coordinated a lot of the lawyer people and high-profile people, advisors that came on board. Martin can talk about that. Nick, when we started putting the legal team together, we were told that we would need about $2 million to fight the court case. So we had to go and raise that money. And one of the most striking things that we did when we were on the board, we did two things on the board. We separated the leagues club from the football club, which was a very important action, because we needed the football club to stand alone. And secondly, we opened up the membership, and the membership was restricted to maybe 300-400 people. It was a closed shop. It was difficult to get in. That was the structure of football clubs at that time.
The majority of them had memberships of about 350-400 people. They had leagues clubs, and people thought if they were a member of the leagues club, that automatically made them a member of the football club, which wasn't correct. But as Jerry said, they're the two most important things, I think, that we did. Separate the board and open up the membership.
We actually had the highest membership, maybe except for the Broncos, of any club when we were out of the comp.
All right.
So we made it
27,000.
27,000, and we only charged, I think from memory, $10 to join.
$10. Yes, I can remember it was $10. Yes, to become a member. Yes. And
for some reason, I remember the figure. It doesn't quite work out, because we somehow ended up with about 340,000 in membership. So I think some people threw in some extra money.
Yes.
But that was part of the fundraising, and of course it gave us a great base with which to market, take to events, and move forward. So that was a very important. But maybe Martin can tell you a little bit about the legal side, because that was really significant.
Okay, well, I just want to, Martin, I just wanted to sort of, talk about this next step in these court proceedings there. It's in June 2000. South, they file an amended statement of claim to the federal court. And Martin, Jerry, I just wanted to ask you about these court cases, because I imagine that you attended most of these court cases.
But every day.
Every day.
All right, you went every. Well, I was able to actually get down to the court when this case was going. I'd actually broken my foot. Okay, so I wasn't able to work. So I was able to get down to the court there for a couple of days. I couldn't get inside the court. You couldn't get inside the court, but they had TVs outside. Court 21A, I remember. It was called TVs there, so you could stand outside and watch what was going on. And I'm not a legally minded person at all, so I just found it very difficult, very confusing, but I also got the impression that the lawyers themselves didn't seem to know what was going on. I never forget there was all this talk about a class of person. This term kept on coming up, a class of person, and how this class of person, related to the core clause in the part of the act. And even the lawyers themselves seemed to be having trouble understanding what was going on. The 2 days that I was there, George Piggins was being questioned the whole time. In fact, I think George was on the stand for the following day as well. He was,
That's right, yeah.
yeah. But I just thought the News Limited's line of questioning was quite demeaning. I don't think they seem more interested in attacking George than what this whole case was about. I was just interested to know what your impressions were of these court cases.
Yeah, it's interesting, you say that, because really that's what it came down to. The basic thing was, and that the News Limited targeted George, and that was from day one. It was a battle between News Limited and George Piggins, and and exactly what you said, that came out, in the court case when they tried to keep him on the stand all that time. But what was interesting about the court case, there were two issues. There was the Trade Practices Act, which was where we eventually won that side of it. But there was also the case relating the contract case. Now, the Trade Practices was the area that we could win, but Trade Practices is very, as you said, very dry argument. It's all legalese.
Yes.
And we switched our attack to the contract case, because the contract case related to what was happening, relating to the game, to the club, and News Limited and the ARL. Now that opened up the whole thing, because that created the area where we could investigate what was happening with the other clubs, how South was targeted, and it was something that really stimulated the interest of all the supporters and everyone, not only followers of rugby league, but the general public in Australia. It was such great interest. And it was exciting, I suppose, to bring out all these revelations. Now, that's what helped us keep going, because my opinion, I think Jerry would agree, we agree on most things, but the contract case was interesting and kept us going. If we had gone from the beginning with Trade Practices, people would have lost interest, because it was just legalese, which happened with the Super League war between News Limited and the ARL. That came down to dry legal argument, and a lot of people sort of lost interest in the legalese side of things. Now, we fought that with the contract case, which kept the interest of everyone and exposed everything about the whole agenda of News Limited. But then at the end stages, when it came down to the nitty gritty, the attack was switched over to Trade Practices.
Okay.
And that's when we were won. But if we'd done that from day one, we wouldn't have been able to last a year, because we wouldn't have been able to get garner support.
Yeah. That's when we found out that, the Cowboys were just granted $28 million, and under disclosure, we were able to get all these documents. And I still can see one in front of me. Martin will remember this. There was a handwritten note from Lachlan to his dad, and saying, we need another $11 million, and there's a little note underneath, okay. So it's just on a little one-hand written paper. So
yes,
it was just all this stuff we got disclosed. The one thing with the Trade Practices, which it went to, was, as Martin said, is what won it. But I remember I was in the box briefly as marketing director.
Yes.
That's interesting, because I was quizzed on the sponsorship. Well, if you get back in the comp, how can you support yourself? Have you got sponsorship? And at the time, we'd done our business plan, and we'd actually budgeted for $10 million not over 1 year, but over the period of, I think it was a 3-year plan, or the 5-year plan.
Yeah.
And we had, and the judge, or there were three judges, but the senior judge said, All right. Well, so I'm adjourning for 2 weeks. We're adjourning the court case, and we need to understand this in writing that you indeed have $10 million. So the court was adjourned, and then we had to get on our bikes and
Right.
raise the $10 million, which was done. And there's a story to that too.
All right. So whilst these court cases are going on, well, the South supporters are still out there raising money. And in June 2000, this is when we see, I suppose, the international sort of flavour of South support base there, because first we have a Lebanese for South's night dinner, and then a couple of weeks later we had Greeks for South's dinner.
Yeah. The food was great. I remember.
Rob, there's something I've got to tell a story which is terrific. At the Lebanese dinner that we had, and I think it was at the La Montage. Yeah, and Alan Jones was the compere. And I'll never forget that night because it really summed up a lot. During that night, we always had fundraising, and there was a lot of fundraising done there. But there were a whole series of jerseys, and I won't go and embarrass some of the clubs, but there were about 4 or 5 clubs that had their jerseys there up for auction. And one of them got 2,000, another one 3,000. I think 4,000 was the next biggest. And they were all prominent clubs, 4 or 5 of the top clubs. I know Melbourne was one of the jerseys, and we couldn't get a bid for it. And actually, I think it was Blocker Roach, to save embarrassment, he bid for it. So we said, well, we just can't let it go like that. So, we bid for it. But the interesting thing was that these 4 or 5 jerseys raised a maximum of about $7,000 between them.
Yes.
The South jersey came up $11,000.
Right. Okay.
Which said it all. And that sort of was all part of that fundraising effort that went on, and those dinners were very successful.
Can I just say, when we're being on the board, we wanted to include everybody, and we had a lot of very prominent Greek supporters. Nick Hatzistakos, of course, who became a director of the club. His cousin Con Saroukas, and they came to us and said, we really want to organise something there. So really, the whole plan was that everybody that came to the door, and literally, Martin will back me up on this, we'd have board meetings and there was a crowd outside of people wanting to get involved and help. And I remember at that time, it was just incredible. And I think the fact, and there's no doubt that with George as the figurehead in the fight, and as Martin said, he was attacked a lot. But one thing that you don't do on the field or off the field is attack George, because it just makes him stronger.
Yes.
And that was a great rallying cry for us. But the other thing that happened was so many people that we didn't even know, and we've got lifelong friendships to this day, just came literally knocking on the boardroom door when we were meeting, and we probably met, I think, maybe 3 or 4 times a week, didn't we, Martin?
Yeah, and because we had a number of subcommittees, of different supporters. One thing that's interesting, because you mentioned that before about the legal, and Jerry mentioned too about the legal people, we organised, and these were volunteers as well. We had a group, and that was, and I remember Nick came to one of the first meetings he attended, and we'd organised legal people who had volunteered to help with their expertise.
Okay.
And I can't name any of them, but there were not just solicitors, but barristers, QCs that came. Nick was astounded when he came that the number of high-profile legal people that we had that wanted to help South, and they were just South supporters, but they wanted to help.
Two of them became judges as well.
Yeah, two of them are judges from that time, but they've all been South supporters, and that was very relevant. And I know the New South Wales Attorney General was also a South supporter. I remember he was presented with a South jersey.
Jim Spiegelman,
Yes. All right, so those dinners were a success, but I suppose what really happened next, it really takes the cake, because August the 19th, 2000, well, Souths are going to play a game of rugby league, and they're going to play a match at Redfern Oval against the USA Tomahawks. And again, this is a tremendous success. Whose idea was this to get this match together?
They'd actually approached, didn't they? They were looking for people to play, and I think
because they were touring around.
David, I remember it all came back because David Newey. It was David Newey who was still president of the US Rugby League.
That's right.
He was very, very good friends with Tony Iro.
Iro, yes, Tony Iro.
And I was just reminded of this from John Tradd before, who did a lot of the filming.
Yeah.
You remember that? And we had our committee, and Sean Garlick, of course, was on the board and very involved in the director. But Tony Iro, and I think he actually played that game as well from memory. But he was really good mates with David Newey, and I found out that that's actually where the content came.
Was it difficult to get players for the game? Was it, because in the end you put together quite a good sort of team there. Was it difficult to get a hold of the players and so forth?
Yeah, it was interesting because, a lot of the footballers, even when they retire, they still want to play.
Oh, yes.
But I still remember, and I'll always remember, there was this young kid that came on, and not many people had heard of him. And I remember he got the ball, I think, around 25, and ran down the sideline. He was so fast, before anyone knew it, he was already over the line putting the ball down. And, of course, that was Nathan Merritt, one of our greatest ever wingers. So he debuted there, but then we had a lot of other players that played. I'm just trying to think of the North Sydney player, Billy
Moore played.
Billy Moore played in that game as well. He'd already retired, but and South won. It was a pretty good performance.
Oh yes,
we smashed them. Yeah.
Well, I mean, the big thing, I think the big thing about this game also was that there was a huge crowd. I mean, I was there at this match.
About 20,000.
There was over 20,000.
And at the same time, they were playing a semi-final, I think, at the time.
Yes.
At the football stadium.
Yes, this was sort of it turned out to be quite embarrassing, I think, for the NRL because in the same week there that this match is taking place, it was a semi-final there between East and Canberra at the football stadium. And, they said the crowd was 16,000 for that match, but most people sort of thought, well, that was highly exaggerated. So the South Tomahawk match sort of easily outdrew one of the NRL finals. And, the other thing that from that match is, because I remember John Elias, who I think was the coach of Lebanon, or might have been the assistant of the Lebanese Cedars, and he strode onto the ground there at half-time and was calling out for Mike Whitney, and he challenged Mike Whitney to a match. And, of course, the following week, South had another match there against the Lebanese Cedars.
There's another little, because we've got all the footage, obviously, of that John Tradd took at the time. And what a lot of people don't realise is that David Moffat actually came to that game.
Yes, that was the other thing, yeah.
And spoke to George and shook hands, and Martin and I were there with them and looked after them. But that was sort of a definite sign that there was a big chink in the armour then. Yeah.
Well, all right. So Friday, November the 3rd, 2000, Justice Paul Finn, this is the court case we were talking about earlier. Justice Paul Finn hands down his decision. He rejects South's bid for readmission to the competition. Amongst other things there, he says that, quote, the agreement did not specifically exclude any club. So, again, as I said, this was the court case that I attended, and I just wondered, did this decision surprise you? Because the feedback we were getting was that, things were going well for South during this case. Did the decision by Justice Paul Finn, surprise you?
I think we were briefed before that there was an opportunity, a strong possibility that could happen.
Okay.
And I don't know if you recall this, Martin, but I remember Nick advising us, Nick Pappas, who was our solicitor,
Yes.
that because we had one judge then, you know.
There was one judge, yes.
If we go to appeal, we'll have 3 judges, and he said, I think we'll have very good grounds for appeal if we don't win. And I think that's when we kicked in the trade practices.
Okay.
Pretty much. But Martin, that's how I recall it.
Yeah. That's what I can recall too, yeah.
But even though South lost this court case, it certainly didn't crush the sort of spirit of the supporters because, it was just a week later or just over a week later, November the 12th, there's a Save the Game rally. And I just wanted to ask you if you was, again, surprised by the number of people who showed up. This was a rally that started at South Leagues Club and walked all the way to Town Hall there. But there was a massive crowd here for the Save the Game rally.
Yeah, again, we were organising that. And Martin and I recall very clearly that it took us 7 days from that exclusion to organise it. And the catalyst that I'll get Martin, you might want to talk about it, was the Auckland Warriors was the catalyst for that one. The anger just built. And, because we'd organised the first rally, we had everything in place ready to move again, if you know. So did you want to mention that, Martin, about all? Because I knew that.
Yeah, that's right. The Auckland Warriors folded on the Friday, and News Limited started the New Zealand Warriors on the Monday, $2 company.
Yes.
That created a lot of anger within certainly our supporters, but also supporters from other clubs.
Yes.
Then that suddenly hit, the realisation hit a lot of the other traditional clubs especially, but hit a lot of the other clubs thinking, and their supporters saying, hey, tomorrow that could be me, that could be our club, because they could just start up a new club. And one of the things that upset a lot of people with News Limited was during the court cases, they kept saying things like, well, if South isn't there, the South supporters will go and follow another club.
Oh, yes, that was
You remember that day in the gallery? The gallery was packed every day. It was like a football match. Everybody went ballistic, started screaming, yelling.
With their jerseys hanging over the railings and everything. And that was when the famous word, and I've got to say exactly as it happened, when they said that, almost to a man, the gallery yelled out, bullshit.
Yes.
All the South supporters. Because then suddenly people realised, hey, that's what it's all about. They're not worried about the game. They're just worried about having teams to show on pay TV. So that was a catalyst that really got people going. And Alan Jones played a big role in that. He really hammered that home on his program. And we had all the figures that were given to Alan on, the whole business with the lack of success of Super League and the success of the traditional clubs.
They're actually in breach of their own guidelines. You talked about the 5 criteria by sinking one club and resurrecting another with nothing.
Yep.
They breached their own criteria.
I suppose the thing that, as you pointed this out there, but the thing that did stand out for me for that second rally was, as you pointed out there, it was the I suppose you'd say the colours. Because it wasn't just South's jerseys. There were North Sydney, Manly, West Balmain.
Everyone. That was because as I mentioned, people were so upset about what happened, with the Auckland Warriors and then turning into the New Zealand Warriors. That's when we started garnering support from all the other clubs. And with the rally, of course. A lot of people also were upset because the first rally where, we had about 40,000 people and it was a huge success, but there was no coverage. It was on page 29, I think, in the Telegraph. Yes. There was no coverage at all, and they kept a lid on it. However, the second rally, we had 80,000 people. There were three news helicopters from each television station up in the air. It was on front page. It was on national television. It was all over the place. And that's when we thought we're going to win this. We were sure we were going to win.
Yes,
I remember. But Newcastle brought down 2 coach loads. But the other thing just to mention before those rallies, when we started the fight in the court case, if I can just go back, one little step. Thanks for indulging, but we'd invited a number of the foundation clubs who were going to merge we wanted them to initially join us because we wanted a group action of the traditional clubs, including the Balmains and some
North
of the
Sydney,
Sydney, West, all that sort of thing, North, and they all refused because they thought there was no chance. And
sorry, hold on, Jerry. So you invited them to what? Join South in what?
News Limited and the
in court.
RL at the very beginning.
Okay.
We wanted the clubs that were going to merge the traditional club. Join us in the action, and they all said no, we won't because we'll take the merger. But I remember Martin had a call from a couple of the CEOs or the clubs later.
Yes.
Said, we would have joined you. We should have joined you, but we thought you had no chance.
See, one of the things, as Jerry said, and one of the reasons, number one, they didn't want to join because, number one, they didn't think we'd win. The other thing was that nearly all these clubs were sailing very, very close to the wind as regards the financial viability of the club.
Right.
Because, they couldn't afford it. They couldn't afford it. And they didn't have a mechanism like we had with, Group 14 to rally the supporters, raise money and the volunteers. And probably some of them could, but it would have taken them a long time to be able to put that together. And of course, they didn't have the expertise and the push, because besides, having legal people, we had business people, sporting people, media people. We just overwhelmed them with the number of the broad church of South Sydney people. And that was one of the fears that they had. They thought if we enter this, we could go broke if we don't win.
Yeah.
And that had a lot to do with them not joining us. We had at one time, and the Sydney Cricket Ground Trust were a great help to us over the years. Jamie Barclay, in particular,
Rod Cavalier
and Rodney Cavalier, the chairman, were a great help to us. We had functions, and they put on a function for us that we had a rally saying keep 16, because when they wanted to bring it down to 14, everyone knew that they were targeting norths and souths. We joined together at that media conference, and it was quite emotional, actually, because we could see the writing on the wall. And the Balmain supporter, I'm just trying to think of his name.
Laurie
Nichols was there,
Laurie.
And he was on. It was on the news that night. He was in tears because he could see what was happening, and it broke his heart.
Yes.
And unfortunately, he passed away a week later. And we think, it had a great effect on him. The whole episode of the game being taken away from him, and he loved rugby league. So that was significant as well. Later on too, we were the first organisation to have a lunch set up on the middle of the Sydney Cricket Ground on the Holy of Holies. That we had there as well, and that was assistance from the Cricket Ground Trust, from Jamie Barclay and Rodney Cavalier and the board, who were a great help to South.
Yeah, but as you said earlier there, Martin, I do think that the second rally, Save the Game rally, it sort of it thrusts home to a lot of people, I think, that it was no longer just about Souths, because all the other supporters were now. I mean, I can remember seeing a group of Canterbury. There were Canterbury jerseys at that rally. There were Canberra jerseys at that rally. In fact, Martin and Jerry, I even saw some Eastern Suburbs jerseys.
There were.
I was just going to say. I was just going to say, a very good friend of mine who I play golf with for many, many years, and a very keen Eastern Suburbs supporter. And he admitted to me after we got back in, he said, "You know what?" He said, "I've never been a great fan of South, and not to this day. However, I marched as well because I saw that it wasn't just South; it was News Limited versus the people who loved rugby league and the supporters, and that's that was very relevant."
We've got a bit of good news on that. We've got the footage of the whole rally from the morning before everybody gathered all the way through to the very end. We got 4 or 5 hours of footage.
All right. I'm going to get onto that, Jerry. Yeah, I'm going to get onto that. Yeah. Now, the following year, in May 2001, South Sydney lodged an appeal, this time to the full bench of the federal court. And Martin and Jerry, I think it's important that we highlight during this whole period, you've mentioned it before there, but during this whole period, there are hundreds of South supporters who are donating their time to help South. And I know there's hundreds of the people, but is there any of these volunteers that stand out? Any of the volunteers that you want to speak about that were helping South during this whole period?
Yeah. That's difficult because there was just so many people.
Yes, I know.
Out people. One of the things too, when you say about volunteers, we had people in the country areas that were assisting us that were volunteers that mightn't have been able to come to Sydney on a regular basis, but we held rallies and we played matches in Dubbo. And we played in Wagga Wagga as well. And we had rallies in Bathurst and in country areas that supported, and they were volunteers too, because we had a dinner up in Scone, and we had, I think, Scone's not a very big place, but we had some very keen supporters up there, and we had a dinner at the golf club up there, and they presented the club with a cheque for $18,000. From that dinner in Scone. Yeah. So when you say about volunteers, I mean, the names are just, there were just so many people.
I think Phil Pike was one key volunteer who was literally worked in the office every day, and Pikey, Marcia, there's so many of them. But particularly those two actually were the two that worked in the office day in, day out. And apart from, as Martin said, there were hundreds of volunteers. There were hundreds of people the marshals at the rallies, the just selling merchandise, like the borough was there very strongly, having beer and merchandise stalls at the games and the grounds and all that sort of thing, and it forged friendships for life, really.
Well, I think a lot of those volunteers went on to sort of form the borough, the South Sydney Supporters Group was sort of the nexus of that group came from these volunteers. And all right.
One of the things, Rob, that I just thought of, you said about people from other clubs and a lot of people. Always remember Tugger Coleman, one of our great players and a great supporter of our club, and our coach, and a very good coach in '99, because we had a pretty good side then. We just didn't have the depth that we have now. We certainly have the depth now. But he always said, with all these other people following the court case and everything and marching in that last rally, Tugger said, there's a little bit of South Sydney in everybody.
Yes.
He was there all the way through. He was just... and having the ex-players involved was terrific, like Sean Garlick as well.
Yeah. Well, one of the things with getting sponsorship in for '99, where we didn't have sponsors, but for companies like Downtown Duty Free and RSLcom and so forth, and with Spud Carroll, Sean Garlick, Craig Wing, They all came with us, with Jerry, Steve, Mike Whitney, and myself. They all came with us and spoke to the sponsors to help us, because they were high-profile people. They were very well known, and they came and they did a lot of work as well to help the public interest.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Let's go forward now to July the 6th, 2001. It goes down as a very big date in the history of the South Sydney club, probably as important a date as all those grand final winning dates there, because on July the 6th, 2001, the full bench of the federal court finds in favour of South Sydney. So what's your initial reaction? And I'd also like you to tell us a bit about the work that you've mentioned him earlier there, but the work of Nick Pappas.
Yeah. Just if I can say why that day was so relevant, you go back to the initial time that I'll always remember when we had to go back to the club and to face the members and supporters at the club that we'd got thrown out of the competition and we didn't have a team. And just the look on the people's faces and their reaction was something that you'll never forget. And then, of course, to then replay that, come back to the club after we had won, and the euphoria was just something that is just, you cannot describe. And I think John Trad got all that on film too. That was what made that so much more relevant, that we got back in.
It was absolutely, and it was absolutely euphoria. I distinctly remember walking in. It was difficult to get into the club because when we came back, we had so many hugs and and crying, and it was amazing.
Took us half an hour to go from the entrance to the club up to the auditorium.
Absolutely, that was an enduring memory. But getting on to Nick Pappas, Nick. Without Nick, they had a tactic. The News Limited and the NRL, they knew that we didn't have a very big legal team. Had some terrific people like Richard Whitekiss, SC, and Tom Hughes. We had a really amazing team, but a very small.
Rowan Dark,
Rowan Dark and so forth, barrister. But Nick was the one who had to put everything together as a solicitor. So what they did, they kept asking for documents, discovery, and Nick would be in the office, and I mentioned Pikey before. Pikey was in there doing all the collating, and they were often in the office with his small team till 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning. Faxes were coming through for court the next day wanting this document, that document.
They were trying to bleed us dry.
They were absolutely trying to flood us. And you know what? Nick and the team met every single deadline, everything that happened. His work for that. And it's important to mention that when we started the court case, he said, well, look, I'll do this pro bono. If we win and we get costs, then, pay me. But if it's not, I'm doing it. So, he was absolutely champion.
Just to give you an idea, and I'm using memory here, Jerry, but I remember the fact of it was mentioned that there was something like 140,000 pages of evidence.
Right. Okay. So,
which was a lot. Which was a lot. One of the things with Nick that I'll always remember, and I think Jerry, all of us do, all during the 3 court cases, we used to meet in Nick's office. And beforehand, and then we'd walk up to Phillip Street from his office. I think his office was in Hunter Street, somewhere around there. But anyway, it was a few blocks.
Bly Street.
Bly Street. And we'd walk up to the federal court in a group with our South scarves and everything. And we'd go past the building sites, and all the workers would be yelling out, "Go South." The cab drivers would be tooting their horns. It was like we were going to battle each time. And the whole lot of us. And of course, when we won and we came out of the course, the same thing happened, but it
Yes.
was twice as loud. But that always gave us a lot of, a great feeling to keep fighting when we got that support just from people in the street that were yelling out, go South.
And Martin and Jerry, I understand now you're helping to make a documentary about this whole saga. Can you tell us a bit about Tales of Reinstatement? Tell us a bit about this documentary.
I've got to just clarify a point there. Yes, Tales of Reinstatement, together with the borough.
Yes.
Because Martin and I help the borough to this day with fundraising and support and whatever we can do, and harnessing our group. And there's a terrific committee of people in the borough led by Michelle Booth and Mel Brunner and Josh, a large number of people anyway involved, and Josh Kemp. And we put on some season launches and fundraising, and John Tradd, who filmed everything during our exclusion, there's literally now 28 hours of footage of the two rallies, the court cases, the games against Lebanon and the Tomahawks, and when we came back to the court and so on. And John at the time approached me and said, "Can I film?" And I said, "Go for it." And everywhere we went, John was just there. And anyway, long story short, he tried to give the footage to the club some time ago, before Russell took over and so forth.
Yes.
At that time, we were just busy, the club was just busy rebuilding and so forth. But anyway, after 20 years, we organised a meeting that Martin and I went to with the borough and John and so on, and offered it to the club to produce a documentary to raise funds for the borough and the junior clubs and South's Cares and so forth. Because the borough, and what happened was the club said, "Look, can we use the footage? We won't produce the documentary, but you guys do it. But we plan to do a series of short stories where we interview people from that time, calling it Tales of Reinstatement." So Tales of Reinstatement is, and the first one's about to be launched, and we were all interviewed, everybody that was involved at the time and so forth. So the first one's about to be launched to all the members. We've actually seen it, and it's sensational. Just a spoiler, but it's going to be, I think, 36 minutes, the first episode. But that's produced by the club, and there's going to be 15 shorter episodes through that period with interviews and snippets of John Tradd's footage. Now, that's a club initiative, but without all of our support. What we're doing with the borough is we're actually we're producing much longer versions of just the raw footage, which we're editing. And that will be available so people can see the whole rally and the games, which the short little stories that the club's producing, with the support of the borough and us and all the members and
South Cares,
and so on. So we'll still be proceeding, and we're looking at the streaming platform for that, and it'll probably be done on either Spotify or iTunes. But all money raised from that will go, and all profits will go back into the borough. But the borough want to donate a fair whack of that. They'll only keep some money to produce some of those great banners they do, probably, but the rest of the money will go in. They want to give at least money to the junior clubs and also to South's Cares.
Okay, all right.
So that project is still on, and it's running in parallel with the Tales of Reinstatement.
All right. Well, just one final question for both of you. Jerry, I suppose this whole thing must have been a very stressful, sort of taxing time not just for yourself, but for a lot of people. But was it all worth it?
Oh, it was probably, apart from, for me, I can't speak for Martin, but I'm sure he feels the same. Apart from having children, it was probably the greatest thing that I've ever been involved in. And I remember it was all encompassing, and I'll never forget in 2002 when we ran on against the Roosters at the Sydney Football Stadium.
Yes.
And I was sitting there with Martin and Martin's wife Leonie and my wife at the time, Inga. I've remarried, I think maybe because I spent too much time working on Souths, but she's a South supporter. And the four of us, we just had tears running down our eyes and literally hugged each other because at that particular point it was all worth it. And
you know what was worth, which followed on from that, 2014, Jerry.
Oh, yeah, we're all there again.
With our families, and to see not only the club win, but to look over the crowd, the South supporters after the game was just something that, that said it all about being worth it.
Yeah, look, a lot of people were in, many hundreds, thousands of people were involved, and everybody was equally a part of it. And we were just, Martin, Steve, and I guess we were at ground zero when we said, let's do something about it. And then, of course, credit goes to the previous board who did a great job, but they were tired and older gentlemen. And we took over, and George, of course, was the Winston Churchill through the fight. But every time we see our team there and seeing us the powerhouse we've become, we just have immense satisfaction, but mainly because of the pleasure, because we know how much it meant to the supporters. When we were excluded, we had people ringing the club saying they had nothing to live for anymore and they were going to do away with themselves. It was that serious. And the look on people and what it meant to people, and to come back and know that we had a part with many hundreds of other people and thousands of other people, just immense satisfaction.
Yeah, one of the things that I always say that we usually say is that, South were the people's team, and rugby league was the people's game. And, that really came to us during that fight back because it meant so much to people. We went through 2 world wars, a depression, and people had very little money, and the only thing they could afford was to go to the football at the time over the years. So that was very important. There were generations of fans of Souths that followed the club, and a lot of them weren't wealthy. I mean, people always say Souths is the battlers team, but that's not true. They're everybody's team because people from all walks of life, and they're all equal as far as South supporters are concerned. It doesn't matter where you stand in the social structure of things. Everyone is equal when you're a South supporter. But it meant so much to the South's people, and having that taken away, and I always say it wasn't just a football issue, this whole fight back. It was a social issue.
Yes.
It had so much to do with Australia's way of life.
And Martin, what do you think that rugby league's administrators learnt from this whole situation?
Well, I think the most important thing that they did learn, and hopefully they remember, is it's not theirs. It belongs to the supporters and the people that pay their money. And it doesn't matter, even with sponsorship or whatever. And even players, players come and go and whatever. But the people who support the game are the very lifeblood of the game. And quite often administrators lose that fact that they become an entity unto themselves, rather than seeing, asking the simple question, what do the supporters of the game want, which is the lifeblood of the game, who support not only the game, but the pay TV, the sponsorship and everything else. And it would be very, very good for some of the administrators at all levels in the game to go and sit in the crowd during a few games to understand what people really feel about the game and how much it means to them. And I think that's the biggest lesson. I always say that if Kerry Packer had sold the game or Rupert Murdoch had bought the game from Kerry Packer, that's fair enough. It was a business. But what happened was Rupert Murdoch tried to take the game that belonged to the people, and it wasn't his to sell. his to buy or the people to sell. It belonged to the people.
Yeah. And I might just add there that to that, and agree with everything Martin said.
Yes.
But when we were reinstated, we had the opportunity to meet with some senior NRL and News Limited people, and a very, very, very senior News Limited official who was on the board of the NRL, without mentioning names, came to us and said, "We picked the wrong team."
That's the way it was. South Sydney, 1999 to 2001. My name's Rob Corra. On behalf of Jerry and Martin listening, this program was recorded in the studios of Undercover Music. Your producer is Adriano Aldemar. Until next time, may the force be with you.